We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
Hey, warmer for the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in a few minutes by one of our good friends, Rocco Miller. He does such great work over at Bracketeer.org. Boy, we are getting some college basketball news right now. Some big-time guards latch on with teams. Skyy Clark is going to be going to LSU. Seth Trimble, he is heading on over to Louisville, so some big-time news there. And then Brennan Lorient, he's going to be back at West Virginia, so we have to recap all that we saw there. And I'd actually have to give a little bit of a shout-out here for those that love the 24-hour marathon to start off the college basketball season. Forgot to mention it yesterday. Field of 68 is going to be bringing that back, so yay, verily there. And we've got a lot to recap from college basketball on Wednesday here in the first segment. And then in segment number 2, we'll talk with Rocco about what we're all seeing with these court cases, the teams that have really been able to muscle up thanks to these court cases, and so much more. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_81. Keep in mind, LRCM, maybe does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. We're going to be continuing on with our conference preview podcast. We'll be doing the Mountain West here over the weekend, so be on the lookout there. Going to try to get the Patriot League set up for next week as well, so I'm continuing these conference previews. I've really staying away from the power conference teams because they're the teams that are really adding right now, so we're making sure that everything is going to be all evergreen on that front end. Do want to make sure that you guys are getting the greatest college basketball season of all time. And before we get into the transfers that we saw in college basketball on Wednesday, do have to just take a look at what we're going to be getting in terms of a banger of a schedule to start the college basketball season. The 24 hours of college basketball marathon is going to be starting off at midnight Eastern time with High Point versus Liberty. That's going to be great. Then you get Grambling versus Northern Illinois at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern. Appalachian State versus Merrimack is going to be a 3 a.m. Pacific, 6 o'clock a.m. Eastern game. Queens versus Winthrop, that is going to be then at 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern. 11:30 you get Murray State, Tennessee State. UTEP, Northern Kentucky at 2. 5:30 UAB McNeese, and then Furman, Bethune-Cookman, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. Big shout out to the guys over at the Field of 68. I absolutely love it. I am a sleepless man, so that is going to be great. What else is great is what we're seeing in college basketball with all these moves as Seth Trimble, he latches on over at Louisville. He has a lot of familiarity, obviously, with the ACC with all of his time over at North Carolina, and this is a massive get here for Louisville because I felt like they did a really good job in terms of muscling up down low. You bring in Flory Badungo, who's going to be so good for this team. I just felt like they need a little bit more scoring. Now, for Seth Trimble, he's never been a great three-point shooter. Last year he shot 28.5% from 3, so I do think that this is going to be a newer look Louisville team, but still, he was able to dole out 3 assists, 14 points per game, a guy that does a really nice job in terms of slashing to the rim, and all of a sudden you look at this Louisville team, and I don't think that we can put them quite on par with Duke. I do think that Duke is going to be the best team in the ACC, but certainly it's a top 10 roster. You've got Jackson Shellsett in there. Adrian Woolley is one of the main guys that returns from the season ago. Alvaro Fogarius, he was solid for Iowa, hit that big shot over Florida. Carter Knox, I know he's out with a little bit of injury, but you've also got 7'5" Gabe Dines. Again, this is not going to be a team that's going to be one of the best three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball, but the size, just the way that they get after you in general. This is college basketball in 2026-27. I love what they're doing there, so that's going to be big. This is also big as Creighton is a team that I know a lot of people are loving. I still feel a little bit lukewarm on them. Obviously, you've got the coaching regime change that happens in the offseason. It was a disappointing year for them last year, but now you bring in Brody Robinson, who was over at Oakland last year, main facilitator for them, and that fills a void that I feel like they needed to have filled, as Austin Schwartz was good in the sample size they had last season, went down the toilet bowl after he was dealing with a little bit of injury, and then his team should be based more around their big men, Oswin Owens Hoonsway, I always get that last name incorrect, Oswin from Providence, we're going to call him that. He is back in the full. Jackson McAndrew, and he was solid when he was out there on the floor, but obviously dealt with a little bit of injury. Wes Enos is a guy that's able to shoot about 35% from three, was a nice player over at South Florida, but for Brody Robinson, I like what he was able to do 2 seasons ago over at UT Arlington. Now he's coming over after he was a part of an Oakland team that they did not play a lot of defense. I'm going to put it to you that way, but still, a guy that is going to be able to go out there, be able to dole out the ball with 6.7 assists per game, and he shot 37% from three-point. A little bit undersized for him to be playing off the ball, but he should be able to give this team a nice spark in the backcourt. That's going to be massive for them. And hey, LSU, they get another guy on the roster. Skyy Clark, who, he wasn't necessarily a part of a lot of teams that won, but he was able to put up some solid numbers last season. And with the way that this roster is shaking up, boy, oh boy, did they need him, because they had Mohamed Diabate. They should be having Bryce Desert, the international man of mystery, coming in. Michael Ruzic is another international man of mystery coming in. And Austin Nunez, Abdi Bashir, who I think is a very solid player, and Divine Ugachukwu, who is over at Michigan State, but he was more of like a 4 or 5 point per game guy. And now you bring in someone that's proven in Clark, guy that began his career over at Illinois, Louisville, last year over at UCLA, was a nice 42% three-point shooter. Like, towards the early part of the career, he was a bit more of a facilitator, played a little bit more off the ball, became a better three-point shooter, and now for LSU, finally, they're looking like they have a little bit of something. They are going to need to be adding more, because they still, in my opinion, are a little bit of a incomplete roster, to say the least. They're going to need to be having these international guys actually become eligible, but it's very much a step in the right direction for them, a much needed step in the right direction, and all of a sudden we might actually have a roster for this LSU team, because now they have a starting 5. Yay, verily, to the fact that they have a starting 5, because for the longest time, they actually did not have that. And then you saw Ricky Ballard actually go from Grambling. He is now going to be going on over to Queens NC, guy that was averaging 7 points per contest, and he shot 37.5% from three-point range. Ricky Ballard, a little bit of a long and winding road, and you're starting to see with these fifth-year guys, it goes beyond just the power conference teams. These mid-majors are starting to muscle up a little bit as well. For Ballard, began his career over at West Georgia at the non-Division II ranks, and he was able to give the team a little bit over a steal per contest last season as well. I really like that pickup for Queens NC, a Queens NC team that I was somewhat bullish on. And then in terms of mid-major ranks as well, Jalen Johnson, he was over at Radford last year. He is going to be adding on over to UNC Asheville. I think that this is a solid gift for them. Now, Jalen Johnson has been passed around like a basket of breadsticks. This is another man that has played for many, many teams, but 12 points, 3.5 assists per contest over at Radford last year. He began his career over at Tennessee Tech as well. If I'm not mistaken, he played over at the junior college ranks, maybe another 1 or 2 of those Division I teams, but guy that's going to be able to give you some facilitation, really help out in general. And for UNC Asheville, another team that I thought out there in the Big South that they were maybe taking a little bit of a step back. They needed a little bit more oomph in that backcourt. They're able to get that here with this pickup, so that is going to be good for them moving forward. And then Christian Henry, who was over at Fordham last season. He heads to a Kent State team that I think is going to be on the rise a little bit. I still don't know if I can put them necessarily in my top 2 in my projector finish for the MAC, but I was certainly having them in the top 4 before. He was over at Fordham last year, giving out 5 assists, about 10.5 points per contest. I only shot 26% from 3, and it's a Kent State team that has always been a little bit Jekyll and Hyde with their three-point shooting, but I always note this with Kent State. When they've really been at their peak under Rob Sendroff, it's when they've been able to generate turnovers. He should very much certainly be able to help out with that, bringing in Chancey Willis. I think it's nice. Jamal Sumlin, when he was out there on the floor last few seasons, as he's dealt with a lot of injury, he's a really good three-point shooter as well, so that's going to be able to help out this Kent State team. I think that is going to be a really nice add for them moving forward. So we are seeing a lot of moves in college basketball. I'm going to continue to monitor these day in and day out on this podcast. And coming next, how about if we do chat with a man that has been doing an incredible job of taking a look at this sport all throughout the offseason, Rocco Miller, BracketHero.org, right here on Chris with myself, Skyy Peterson, now a part of the Decent Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word, .com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back to lovely Las Vegas for Cuts with myself, Greg Gibbs Peters, and now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And it's always great to be joined by this man, as Rocco Miller is doing such great work over at Bracketeer.org, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. He is dialed into everything that we are seeing with these court cases. He's helping these teams out with, for some of these teams, they have a few final games that they're looking to polish up. He's doing a great job there. There are so many teams that entrust them with their schedule because he is one of the most trustworthy men in the business. You're able to find him on Twitter/X at his first and last name, Rocco Miller, the number 8 altogether. And Rocco, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Good to be back with you. How are you doing on this fine day today?
I am doing great, and Rocco, my friend, it is absolutely wild right now. What we are seeing in college basketball is we are getting more and more court cases. We are getting more and more that is just happening in general. And just how are you taking a look at the landscape of college basketball where we've got roster building happening in the middle of August?
Yeah, I think this will be remembered as probably an unprecedented period for the timing of it all, right? Like, I think once the dust settles in future seasons, we'll at least know, the 5-and-5 rule will hopefully get to a steady point where the portal will either have 1 or 2 windows. I don't know if we'll ever need a late window like this again, but never say never. However, I think, like we talked about last time I joined you, Greg, the players and the programs really are what makes up the NCAA. So, it's really interesting to me that the NCAA continues to fight something that is only going to become more and more insurmountable over time. I think it's become abundantly clear that as more teams take commitments from players who are from the class of 2022 that still have a 5th season theoretically available, once they take that commitment, as part of that commitment, that school is then going to give them their own resources towards legal representation in court. So you have to imagine that the more and more players that get involved, the more and more states that lawsuits drop in, which we could see daily like we have been, the harder and harder it is going to be for the NCAA to win. It's also going to be more and more unlikely for the NCAA to really want to win. I think what the NCAA is secretly hoping for, just my own opinion, take it for what it's worth, is to get to a point to where it's just so overwhelmingly accepted that a bunch of teams, especially these big national teams that keep getting improved rosters, is just kind of nationally and publicly accepted to the point where they would look like a total bad guy if they tried to take that player away from those teams. These are the same types of teams that make the NCAA a $1 billion business. The NCAA tournament's a $9 billion tournament with a B. Like, they're not interested in, if Jackson Kohler goes to Kentucky or, Mr. Robinson's going to Creighton now, and you've got Skyy Clark going to LSU. Those are the types of brands and programs that fuel the NCAA's own wallet. We're getting to a point now where I think it's pretty clear these guys are going to be able to play. Obviously, we don't know how it's all going to play out in court and all that, but I just don't even think there's a serious bone in the NCAA's body that wants to put any of these huge brands at a disadvantage.
Yep, I'm right there with you, and I do think that for the NCAA, maybe I have this wrong as well, but they're just hoping to buy a little bit more time to make it more difficult on these guys as well, because they know that they're going to lose these court cases. I can't remember last time the NCAA has won a court case, and it feels like it's just one of these cases where with the NCAA, they're just trying to see what's all out there, and they're making a lot of empty threats, like trying to discipline teams for the ghost transfer rule and everything like that, where I think that we both agree. I don't think that they have any foot to stand on with that.
My best guess is that the NCAA strategically is doing their very best to do what we call threading the needle, to where if they were just to give up now, they make a bunch of these teams even more upset that were done with their roster early, that followed all the rules, et cetera, right? The longer NCAA can public perception, give off the public perception that they're going to fight this tooth and nail till the start of the season or through September, the more accepted, I think, in their mind, they'll be by those particular teams that have been done. Like, hey, guys, we did our best here, but, the court's not allowing us to enforce this. We're going to have to let these teams who didn't have complete rosters or teams that dipped into their pocket to improve their rosters have these players. There's nothing we can do about it. So I think they're really, that's my best interpretation. Again, this is me, looking at it for what it is on my own, not any kind of inside information, but I think this is the one theory that would make a lot of sense to me is if the NCAA can paint the picture that they're protecting those schools by fighting, and then ultimately these schools that are improving their rosters, finishing their rosters, taking these really good players with experience, get what they want anyway, then that's where we're gonna ultimately land. But it allows them to not take as much heat from all sides.
Yep, I think that is very well said by you, and that's the way that I'm interpreting things as it goes along a little bit more, as well as Rocco Miller, who does such great work over at Bracketeer.org, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Rocco, with everything that we've been seeing over the last few weeks, how have you been taking a look at just the lay of the land with some of these teams? Because I think without question, the biggest winners right now is Texas Tech. Getting back Darian Williams, bringing in JaMychal Stillwell. It was a team that I had question marks with because you just don't know what JT Toppin is going to provide this year. All of a sudden, they look locked and loaded, but I'm noticing that there's a lot more mid-major guys that are putting their head in the ring in terms of trying to be able to get an extra year of eligibility. Illinois State has already inked a guy or two. We're seeing Javon Porter going back to Loyola Marymount, and I do think that some of these mid-major teams might start to benefit as well.
Yeah, we shall see. I mean, there's certainly some obvious holes that some of these rosters had going into this late window where they get kind of a mulligan on the process to where they can look to fill those holes. There's also certain teams that, like LSU and Texas Tech, were probably the two biggest names, to where they were really hedging their bets early that this was all going to happen and they were going to be fine. And that was actually part of their original strategy. So for those teams, kudos to them. They were smarter than most in the room for what they wanted to get out of it. For those that, didn't get what they want early on, it's a mulligan for sure. But I also think teams like Florida and Duke and teams that did amazing work in the April and May period, they're also still winners because think about it, they will have been together for a few extra months over the summer and playing together, getting to know each other, building those relationships. We see how important continuity is in college basketball and how also when you bring in outside people from your program that maybe not have been there in the past, like a Seth Trimble going to Louisville or, any of these examples you want to look at, that can sometimes, and we saw last year in a lot of different levels, it can be a little bit of a poison pill for the chemistry and that locker room camaraderie. I don't want to just go out and, obviously there's a talent upgrade on paper and that's impossible to dispute. But I am of the mindset of the psychology and the human interconnectivity and the kind of personalities you bring to your team really is critical to team success. And so we'll see how it shakes out. But I mean, I think with LSU, unless they knew which guys they were getting early, maybe that will still work out okay for them. Same with Texas Tech. But some of these other places where they're randomly bringing in a couple new guys and maybe taking minutes away from other guys, that could create some real turmoil that we don't really get to see until later.
Oh, and I am so glad that you brought up LSU because it is hilarious that as we are recording this on the 12th of August, going to be coming out on the 13th of August, that they have 4 guys on the roster. Now, part of that is that there's the just process with bringing in the international guys, so they do have more than 4 guys that they expect to have, but what do we make out of the, I'm going to call it what it is, disaster of an offseason we've seen with LSU, because it feels like they took a bunch of swipes and a bunch of swings that are not really working out right now.
Well, there's a plan there. That's what I keep alluding to. So whether it's risky or not, I'm waiting to judge at the very end. It's a long off season in this college basketball landscape that we're in. And, obviously they got Skyy Clark just recently. So that technically would give them a 5th. I think a lot of these European guys coming over, it's going to take them a little bit to get cleared. I think their school starts in the next week or two. We'll probably see them cleared. So right now with my roster tracking, I've got them down for 10 players. And if that's accurate, which I assume it is, our friend Jim Root does a great job. You can go to, if you have access to his spreadsheet, which I know some of your listeners do, you can see those 10 guys right this minute. And that would only leave 5 more spots, which I think they'll figure out. I think they're in the running for a couple late reclassification players as well from high school. Obviously, they're very active in the portal chase. They've got Abdi Bashir. They've got Mohamed Diabute, a figure to be part of the equation. RJ Luis is obviously the huge wild card here. Are they actually going to get this guy eligible? Well, the way things are going right now, I kind of give them a little bit better chance than maybe you would have a couple months ago. And so you suddenly might have yourself a team that legitimately should be in the NCAA tournament sooner than later.
Yep, it is going to be fascinating to see what we get out of them. And there's been a lot of turnover. There's been a lot of moves made over the last few weeks. And that Skyy Clark news, that came out about 30 minutes before we recorded this. So that was massive for LSU. So you're definitely in on that. But that said, just over the last few weeks, is there a team or two that you're feeling differently about now than before? Because I do think that we hit upon the most obvious one in Texas Tech. They've really upgraded, but are there a few other teams that you look at and now you're just really starting to change your tune on them?
I'm taking my time with it. I'm taking it day by day like I know you are, but I think with the ability for a couple of teams actually that were projected probably at the very bottom of these power conferences, both Penn State and Utah. Penn State suddenly is getting Josh Reed back. That's going to help them at least be a little feisty. I liked his game last year, an outmanned team last year, and probably will be this year in most Big Ten games. But that gives them a little bit of sauce to work with experience that they really need. And then over at Utah, I thought that was a big time pickup to pick up Trey Campbell. An absolute winner, played 4 years at Northern Iowa, led them to the Arch Madness title last year. He was just a huge part of everything they do. And I think if you're a place like Utah, it's the second year of Alex Jensen. You're out-resourced in most cases across the Big 12. The way you got to win is get some really good team guys. Getting a guy that's won the Missouri Valley and one of their leaders is a great step. So I'm not necessarily saying Utah is even going to finish higher than 12th, but I am saying I feel a little bit better about the Utes than I did a couple days ago. That was really important. I also think, Terrence Ginyard getting back to Duquesne keeps them pretty feisty. He's a great kid. And so we'll see. I think the A-10 is going to be really exciting no matter what, but I think with him back in the fold, that really gives them some upside. And so, I just think those are the teams just recently that I've really started to say, okay, we might have something to work with now versus being very easy to dismiss.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I do think that a lot of these lesser teams have been able to benefit quite a bit recently, and I'm so glad that you mentioned Duquesne. I'm feeling quite a bit more bullish about them bringing back your top scorer from a season ago. That always helps, and it's just like on this podcast. We need great guests to help, and you're one of the best in the business, Rocco. You're doing such great work, whether that be over at bracketeer.org, Basket Under Review, when it comes to more of the bracketology and the college basketball season, Field of 68, and so much more. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Greg. Thank you very much. Starting to kick the tires on some head coach interviews for Basket Under Review. So really excited. By next week, it will drop. But I'm doing a very unique interview with the new head coach of UL Monroe, Ryan Cross. He's just an awesome guy. And the way they're building their program and the way they're doing their schedule is absolutely wild. It's a bunch of JUCO all-stars, a couple of transfers. They're playing multiple back-to-back games to get money, as you may have saw with the UL Monroe Warhawk schedule release that happened recently. So check that out if you haven't, and then that'll get you ready for my interview with Mr. Cross next week. We're going to have so much fun with that. And the one thing that excites me is that UL Monroe, resource-wise, I think everybody across the Sun Belt or anybody that follows the Sun Belt knows how big of a struggle it's been to get that thing going. This guy has the best chance to get that program in the right direction of anybody in the last decade plus. So just really excited to see how this all shakes out. I think there's some real talent in this JUCO class that he brought in, and he's got to keep those kids together because JUCO kids can go a lot of different directions. So it'll be a fascinating story all year that I'm excited about. And then we'll have some more of those coming soon. I'm talking with Takeo Siddle, probably going to come on in the next week or two at UNC Wilmington, have a few others in the works as well. So make sure to check out Basket Under Review for all of that, plus all the amazing stuff they got going on across the platform. Bracketeer.org, the ACC schedule page is now open and accessible for everybody as we've been talking. I'm getting 5 questions since we started about these different schedules. You have to remember at bracketeer.org, Greg, some of these games we're the only people in the country that knows about these games. So as a page gets released, the public is seeing these matchups for the first time. And so keeps it really exciting. We'll be on to the Big East here this weekend. And then I think now that we're in August, these things are just going to roll. And we've got a plan this year for the first time to get all 32 conferences live and updated. So it'll be a great resource for everybody. It should already be a great resource, but just for anybody at any level of Division I to be able to access and see who's playing who and how they put their schedule together. That's the whole makeup and design of the site. And then as we get closer to tip-off, a lot more season preview type work, as well as the anticipated preseason bracket for 76 teams for the first time. So I'll have some fun with that. But we'll talk about that more next time, and appreciate all your time.
Absolutely. Rocco is doing an incredible job looking at this amazing sport of college basketball, and every single time he joins me, learns such great insight. So big thanks to Rocco for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you, for this podcast, you have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_D1. Keep in mind, LRCM, the me does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast. Good to be continuing on with the conference preview podcast, no question about it. And then once we get back in season, it's going to be picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. I want to try to make sure that this is the greatest college basketball season of all time. So I'll be right back with you guys tomorrow. Thank you.